Okay, we're getting things going here. Just got to get all the stream software kicked off. I wish it just happened like all at once and I didn't have to make small talk here while I wait for it to go. There's Instagram. There we go. I think that's it. Substack's still connecting. I don't know why it's like that. There we go. Substack's on. TikTok's on. Chat. We'll see if chat's on. But yeah, I'm excited for today's topic. I think this is one that came from, was it from Reddit? I can't remember if it was from Reddit, but I think it's a good conversation. So for folks that are joining, if you're new to my live streams, definitely, leave like comment in the chat. I'm happy to answer questions. It is an AMA format. If you're watching the recorded version of this, just a reminder, like this is why I put the AMAs on. Hey, Alan, thanks for letting me know LinkedIn's working. I appreciate it. Yeah, if you're watching the recordings, like I do the AMAs so that I can answer stuff in the chat and engage with folks. Otherwise, I would just record YouTube videos. So happy to do that. Hello, Natalie. Yeah, you're back. Awesome. Thanks for being here again. I appreciate it. So yeah, I'm going to put a link to the article. And for folks that don't know, this article won't go everywhere, unfortunately. It just goes to YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook. But I always kind of mention to people that the topics for the live streams are like 99% of the time they're going to be my newsletter article. It's at weekly.devleader.ca. No, you don't have to go subscribe to a newsletter. I understand that not everyone wants more email. That's totally cool. You can treat it just like a blog, right? So if you're like, hey, the live streams are kind of cool, I want to see what's going to be discussed, definitely just go to weekly.devleader.ca. I put out the newsletter on a Saturday. Like I said, you don't want the email, no sweat, head there. You can see what the topic's going to be. And something else that I'm trying to do is I'm noticing that it's more effective for me to be able to use content from Code Commute, which is my vlog channel that I do for software engineering. I've been recently taking the topics from Code Commute, and on Code Commute, it's kind of like this live stream where I'm just kind of blabbing, but I'm not live streaming from my car because that would be kind of dangerous to go to the chat and drive. So instead, I just kind of record myself talking about software engineering topics and answering people's questions that come in ahead of time. And I've been finding that to make my newsletter article about that and to make these live streams on the same topic has been working really well, at least for keeping me like focused on what I would like to be making content on. So I'm going to keep doing that. So if you're if you don't want the newsletter, that's cool. You can check out Code Commute. I think I've been putting out 2 videos a day on Code Commute, which is pretty wild during the week at least. So it's at least 10 videos a week. So it's been really fun to do that. So anyway, the topic for today, that's enough blabbing, right? Topic for today is going to be programming at school versus coding at work. And I think this one came from Reddit, but I can't remember. Someone might have asked about it. And yeah, the reason I like this as a topic is because I think it's actually applicable to a lot of people. And when I say that, it's applicable to a lot of people, whether they're thinking about it or not, which is maybe kind of funny. But the idea here is that there is going to be, in my opinion, a big difference between programming at school versus coding at work. And I think understanding the differences and sort of the intention behind them is really valuable. I had a couple people commenting on the original YouTube video and they were saying like, hey, I never thought about it this way. Like, thanks. I think I needed to hear that. So we'll dive into that and kind of go look at the differences. Now, I should call out, this is from my perspective. If you have different thoughts, feel free to chime in the chat. And as I'm blabbing away here, feel free to chime in the chat and ask questions. As a heads up, because I know you can't see what I'm seeing right now, but there is the shared chat, which is a bunch of platforms, but then TikTok is separate, Instagram is separate, and Substack is down here and it's separate. So thanks for joining on the Substack live stream, folks. I am eager for them to make Substack streaming not just on the mobile app, and then that way I can look at you at the same time. But yeah, feel free to ask questions. I will try to monitor the chat as best I can. Okay, let's dive into it. So coding at school. So for a little bit of background, I went to the University of Waterloo for computer engineering. And I would say that my experience with school is like, I didn't enjoy the school part. I felt a lot of school for me was a bit of a waste of time. That's how it felt going through it. And it meant that assignments and stuff like I wasn't really into, but I had a lot of courses that just like weren't programming at all. Now, I went for computer engineering, so I would have kind of expected, I'm going to get like half hardware courses, half software courses, but it was like, I don't know, like 4 years of like math, chemistry, physics, like just stuff that I like, I don't know. I understand that there's an importance there, but it just felt like I was spending a lot of time doing stuff that like, I'm kind of getting towards the end of my degree here, and like it would be kind of nice if I was learning about stuff that felt applicable. But when I did have programming classes, they were, it just felt like they were like very much like small scenarios. And when I think about how other people are going through school, by the way, your mileage, like not only can vary, like will vary. Hey, Amar, good to see you on TikTok. I just wanted to mention that, like, for me, it was very much like these smaller scenarios. So the way that I talk about this from the perspective of what you're learning in school is that there is a purpose for what, like, why this stuff is set up this way in school. Hey, Dylan, good to see you. Thanks for joining. Dylan participates in Code Commute. So I've appreciated his questions coming in. I've answered a couple of them. So thanks for being here. When we're looking at stuff in school assignments, right? So if we think about like how school is structured, a lot of the time what's happening is that we're being presented concepts, right? So, and I can't say this in Canada, I would say like college and university are different things, more often structured that college is very much hands-on and university is much more like theoretical in general. Amar is asking what my major is. I went for computer engineering. So honors Bachelor of Science in Computer Engineering. And when we're getting presented these concepts in university, the idea is that you'll have someone like basically instructing the class, they're introducing these concepts to you, and generally what's happening is they're presenting some information high level to you in a couple of different ways, right? So they might be talking to you about it, they're going to be writing it on the board or projecting it, I don't know, things are different these days, I guess, putting slides up, or who knows, right? And then the idea, hey Brax, good to see you. The idea is that you are going to be taking notes, and all of this sounds very simple, but what's happening is that information is being processed in different ways, right? And this is a very like overly simplified way of looking at like how we start to learn things. You have some auditory cues, you have some visual cues, and then you also have the fact that you are writing things down. So you kind of have to process the information because, I don't know, for people that have gone through this, right? If you're just writing down the notes word for word, like, yes, that will help reinforce what's happening, but sometimes like what's more efficient is that you have this whole wall of notes that are put up in a lecture, and like, what are you going to do? Just like, you could just take a picture of it now, right? And then say, good, I have my notes, or maybe they just pass out the notes. But the whole idea of taking notes, in my opinion, the benefit is not just to have something to study from. Like I said, this is probably changing for a lot of folks these days, but it's that you actually have this additional opportunity to process what you're like being presented to you. And that means that you have this extra pass of like, how do I understand this? Or how maybe I don't understand it. But the idea is that you get that extra processing, and that's another opportunity to reinforce what's going on. But it doesn't stop there, right? Because if you're like me and you're sitting in a lecture hall and you're taking notes, or I guess if you're like me, you're in a lecture hall and you're just asleep, odds are that's not going to be sufficient for like understanding the concepts. Now in school for me, the way that it worked was that my exams were very much like the heavy component of my grades. I had like calculus classes that were like 95% of my grade would be the exam. And like that's kind of ridiculous, but it meant that I had to get good at writing exams. And for other classes where I felt like I actually like had to learn concepts, this goes back to like what we would do more of in like elementary school and high school. And I want tying this all back to programming, right? So you would get projects and assignments, and what they would do is like for math classes, right? You'd get all these word problems. You'd have to go doing all these crappy word problems, or when you were a lot younger, you might have to do like, you know, multiplication tables and stuff, but you're practicing doing these things and it's reinforcing what's going on. And I found in school, and a lot of the way that programming is structured in school is to reinforce the concept in isolation, which is a key point. So without, I'm not going to be able to make up an example off the top of my head, but if you're thinking about an assignment that you would get in school, they're trying to introduce, some data structure, some algorithm. And what would happen is that they're like going through the lesson. Here's how it works, right? You're writing the notes on it. You're making your own example. Cool. Okay. This is all great. And then you get the homework assignment, and it's like, now you have to go implement this in C#, because we all know what's the best language? C#. That's right. Sarcasm, a little bit, kind of serious, but so you would go home and do this, and you'd work on these assignments, but they're very much in like isolation to go practice the concept. So when I go to talk about coding at work, I want you to remember this part when I'm talking about what it looks like to do school assignments. The LinkedIn usernames aren't coming through. Let me go back. This is from Jan. Because I saw Alan's name, I saw Natalie's name, and then I see LinkedIn user. But if I jump over to LinkedIn, did you have assembler, Pascal, VB, Delphi programming in school? We had, what did we have? So I learned in high school, it was VB6 and then VB.net. And then I think my very first, it was like my first programming class in university that I had in first semester. They introduced us to C#, which is awesome because I had just learned VB.net, and C# is also in .net. The framework is .net. So I remember they were teaching us C#, and I was like, hey, it's close to VB.net, so I like understood it. And I did really well in that class because I could already program in VB.net, and it was similar enough, like obviously some differences, but that helped a lot. But then we had, what did we have? We had Java at some point. We had C++ at some point. There was a couple of like Yak and Bison. What are those? Are those, I can't even remember. I'm trying to search Yak, Bison. It's not, I don't think that was the language, right? That was like it's a parser. That's right. Yeah. So we had we worked with that, but I can't remember what we were building with it. A parser for what I mean. And maybe it was contrived. But anyway, yeah, we had some weird stuff like that, but we did a little bit of assembly, like a tiny bit. No Pascal, no VB in university, no Delphi, C++. I don't think we used Python for anything, but I think there was a class with Java, and I want to say there was something else. There was something we used for embedded programming, and I can't remember what it was. One sec. I'm not sharing my screen, so you can't see. Oh, I'm thinking of VHDL, but that's for circuits. So, yeah, it was pretty limited. And I think they didn't spend much time aside from that programming 101 or 100 course or whatever. That was the only time they were really teaching us about a specific programming language. And then otherwise it was more like low level concepts for the most part. The fact that we were writing parsers, I don't know, that felt like a weird use of time in my opinion. But anyway, that's that. Hopefully that answers your question. Pardon me. What was I saying? I'm all over the place. I can't remember now. The I think the last thing I was saying was that in school these things are like concepts mostly in isolation. So that's a key point because like I said, the goal is very different in school than in work. The goal in school is to reinforce concepts so that you learn them. And I mean, I'm saying that out loud. I realize that sounds like very obvious. Duh, that's why we go to school. So, yes, that's what you're doing. But the structure of how you're given assignments, the purpose of those assignments, they're different. So, if I jump over to my newsletter article, I put down a couple of like sort of key differentiating characteristics of these things that we have. So let me start by saying the focus of the school assignments is that you're kind of isolating the topic. I wrote down like eliminating the distractions or noise from the topic you're looking at. So if it's to go implement a data structure, you're going to be able to focus on building that data structure. It's not build the data structure and then like integrate it with all these other things. It's like, no, just build the data structure. Or here's like a graph traversal algorithm. Go implement that. You're not building a web service and stuff on top of it. It's very purposeful. And I found a lot of my assignments were like that. And I feel like when I see people posting about their assignments and stuff, it's basically like that, but they might be phrased in like a word problem. But you're still like going to go implement the graph traversal algorithm or whatever you happen to be doing. So eliminating noise and distractions so you can focus on the thing. I said that you get to practice the implementation so you have a better understanding of the mechanics, right? So if you were taking notes before, like that's one way, but when you actually go to write it and you're getting stuck on stuff, like in my opinion, you're learning more in depth about the mechanics of how it works, especially because the next part I said troubleshooting and seeing when things work, you get to see the concept in action. So you might be doing your graph traversal algorithm and you wrote the program and you're now running it and you're like, I'm getting a different result and it's weird. And then you understand like as you go through it, like what's going on, right? So you go to debug this thing and you're like, oh, like that's what's up here. So it just gives you a better understanding when you're more hands-on. Harry, good to see you. I think that you sent me a message last week and I still haven't responded to it. So I'm saying that out loud because I did see it and I just don't think that I got to it. I've had a couple of super busy weeks. Last week in particular, I think Thursday night, maybe not even Friday, might have been the first day last week where I felt like I wasn't like underwater with everything else going on. So apologies for not getting back to you. And I will, I'll try to go check your message. If it's not tonight, I'll try to get to it tomorrow. So I apologize. Mauricio, good to see you as well. Thanks for being here. So I'm going to talk about the constraints that we generally see with school projects. And again, this isn't like a rule. I'm not saying this is universally how everything works. This is a generalization. I hope, I try to say this a lot, but I hope when folks are like watching my videos or listening to what I'm saying, I hope that you understand that I'm like, essentially, I'm never trying to communicate like, you know, things are always this way or never this way. I'm trying to just give you different perspectives on things. So if you have different opinions, like that's great. Like, let's talk about them. I'm not here to tell you it's only one way or some other way. So the constraints I said, time constraints are essentially your due dates, right? So like time is a thing and it's not like there's no time constraints with school assignments, but the time constraint is really, you know, the prof or the TA or whoever, like they set a deadline and they're like, that's the due date, get it done by then. Okay, so there is a time constraint. I said there often aren't real dependencies for your code, for you to code your project. And what I mean by that is like they've given you the instruction and they've given you, you know, the assignment and off to the races. You have your deadline, go get it done. You're often not like, oh, like this other project from this other class, or, you know, we have some other team of students in the class, they're working on a project. We need to wait for them to get their project done before we can do ours. unless you're copying it. But like the idea is like you don't have other dependencies, right? It's just the material from the course. I said that you're, at least in my experience, like you're almost always starting from a fresh slate, which is interesting. This is another, like all of these points I'm making, by the way, I want you to keep in mind when we go to the next part of this conversation. But, you know, go build this graph traversal algorithm in Java. Okay. So you go into whatever IDE you're using, Eclipse. People use that? I don't know. I don't like Java, but you go into your IDE, and then you start your new Java project and you start coding your graph traversal algorithm. Almost all of your school projects kind of start like that, right? Or they'll give you like here's a couple of method names, like the signatures, I mean, and like go take that and run with it. And you're like, okay, but it's a very unique situation because you're starting from scratch almost always. And then I said the other thing here is the priorities you need to balance when you're doing this kind of stuff are this project and your other assignments. Like that's how you're prioritizing things. Now, the caveat here is like, sure, yes, you might have a part-time job. You want to have a social life on top of just going to school. Like these are, sure, there are other things you need to balance, but when it comes to your schoolwork, you're balancing between this assignment in your programming class or classes and other projects you got going on or other assignments, other homework or studying. So there are priorities. There is balancing things, but it's still very kind of specific. There's often not dependencies between these things. It's just you trying to balance your sort of allotted time. Alan's saying, yeah, the classwork tended to emphasize the concept and philosophies. Professional work has been more about collaboration and integration of applicable skills and tooling. And there's more meetings. Womp womp. Yeah, exactly. So it's a good opportunity for us to pivot over to the other side of this, which is going to be talking about the work aspects. And Alan's kind of hinted at a handful of things here, right? There's other stuff going on at work. And to kind of pause for a moment before I jump over to talking about stuff at work, I just want to remind people, I guess the chat, it was weird. There were people talking in the chat earlier, but the counter for the chat wasn't updating at all. So it was like 0 people are here. And then people were talking and I'm like, which one is it? So now that I see that people have actually joined and the counter's going up and it's not all in my mind, I just wanted to remind people the reason that I wanted to talk about this was because I have seen, in my experience, there's a discrepancy between what people expect when they're in college, university. I can't speak on behalf of boot camps because I just don't have that much experience with that many students coming out of that, just personally. But how work has been structured before they get into their first full-time role. And because of that discrepancy, I think that it's worth kind of like providing a little bit of guidance and insight because, like I said at the very beginning of the stream, this stuff is applicable for many people and they might not even realize it. And they might have a bit of a surprise when they kind of switch over, they graduate and they go get their first full-time job. So what does work look like? Well, let me start with a couple of examples of like some patterns I've seen, and then we can kind of dive into some of these characteristics. So again, these are just like high level examples of things I've seen where I want to say like it's not optimal. And like I don't blame people, right? I want to present these examples to you so you can say, oh, like that, I can see why that's happening. So I have seen people come from I'm not trying to, these are generalizations, so I don't mean to like sound like I'm picking on groups of people, but like masters, PhD students, I have seen people join. So this is going back to when I was working in a startup before Microsoft. And what would happen is we would, work's getting assigned, people have to go do their work. So they're working through different features or bug fixes and stuff. And then there was a pattern sometimes where people, and the pattern I noticed was like the more time spent in school, like going for master's, going for PhD, the more that it seemed that people had this idea of like code is theoretical. which sounds, I mean, it's kind of a weird statement. I don't know a better way to say it, but the idea seemed to be that, like, I need to get this code made and I need to make it perfect, because what's going to happen is, like, it's not done until it's perfect, right? If I were to go hand this assignment in, if this were an assignment, someone's going to grade it. So, like, let me go spend the time making this code the most perfect it can be. And the side effect of that was that I often had challenges with people that were, again, masters, PhD, where it's like, hey man, like, we gotta get this going. Like, I think your code's probably been ready for like 2 weeks now. Like, what are we doing? And I'm exaggerating a little bit, but the idea was just that there was so much emphasis put on, like, how do I make this code perfect? That's how it seemed, right? So that's one kind of example to think about. Another example that I noticed a lot was that, what's a good way to put this? The focus on, like, why we're doing things seemed to be kind of missed. And this is another thing, like, I don't blame people for this. So I hope that as I'm talking about these, I'm not like trying to pick on people or anything like that. These are just observations. But it's almost like, okay, let's say we have to go build this feature for users to be able to navigate this part of the product and, I don't know, be able to view this important data that they couldn't otherwise see before in this format. And it's really going to help them simplify their workflow, because otherwise they'd have to go to these 5 other screens and spend an extra 30 minutes like every day when they go to use this. It's a pain in the ass. So we're going to build this thing. And it's going to be awesome. And what would, like, kind of happen is that people didn't really get the why. So they would go build things, and, like, so they're like, okay, I got the code checked out. I'm going to go start building these things. And then they're kind of poking around and they go, oh, well, this code's kind of gross. Like, I got to go touch this. And they're over here, they're over there. And what ends up happening is, like, this mindset of, like, we have to, I don't know, it's a weird thing to explain, but it's almost like the goal is to go improve the code, which is nice. It is nice, but that's not the reason that you're employed. It's a weird thing to say, right? Yes, as you're working, code will get improved, but you weren't hired just to go make code prettier. You were hired to deliver value to customers. That's how businesses work. And this is, I think, one core thing that I think really gets missed. And it's a really difficult lesson for people. This is, by the way, this point here is, like, arguably one of, like, the takeaways that I want people to have from this little dialogue here. But I think one of the big things that people miss when they compare how they're working in school versus, like, in their first job is that they're missing the fact that you are not hired just to go make code. Because I could sit at my desk all day and go make some code. I could make things do other stuff. I could go adding 1 million tests. I could have 300% code coverage. I could go refactor everything 10 times. You could do all of this stuff coding. And I'm not saying those are bad things. But what gets missed is that you are hired because you need to be able to ship value to customers. It's how a business works. Businesses will provide value to customers that are willing to pay for that value. So the customers pay the business, and then the business pays you. If the value is not getting shipped to the customers do not pay, and then the business cannot pay you. And I realize what I'm saying. It sounds very obvious. But I think the reality is that I think a lot of people miss that. And the reason that this stands out to me for a couple of reasons, and why I'm trying to emphasize it, is because not only have I noticed this kind of thing happen where people, join a company and they don't, it's almost like I said, they're missing the why they're doing it. It's because you're trying to get value out to customers, and they focus so much on just what code is, which is one part. But the other part is because it's almost like because of my journey to where I am now. I kind of shared this at the beginning, and I've shared this on other live streams, but like I worked at a startup for 8 years before Microsoft. I was there since essentially the beginning when they started building out their engineering team. And so we started with the first version of the product from the founder. And yes, the founder already had, paying customers, but we basically took that and started building everything. And we had to scale everything, and we had to go through all these growing pains. And the only reason it worked is because we were constantly trying to ship value to customers. There was no time to go make everything perfect, which I think, like I said, the examples I'm trying to give you are to try and illustrate this idea of like, I know, like, I'm an engineering manager now. I've been doing that for 12 and a half years, but like, honestly, I understand. Like, I love writing code. This is weird maybe. I love refactoring code. I like making code better, but we don't have infinite time to do that. We need to be shipping value to customers. Yeah, it sucks. There's going to be times where you're like, that means we have to incur, I can't speak. We have to incur some tech debt here, like consciously going, yep, like that's not the most best architecture we could have here. And the best way would take us another 5 months. It might even just take us an extra 2 weeks. Too bad we don't have the time right now. There were many situations like this where we had to make decisions. And at the end of the day, I can say this with a lot of confidence. We would not have achieved success if we didn't constantly have hard conversations like that. We could have sat there refactoring code forever and then shipped less often, right? We could have said, no, we're not incurring any other tech debt. We can't move forward. We could have sat on things and we would have missed out on opportunities. There was code, I'm sure, that we said, we have to refactor this. We must. It's so bad. And then we said, but yeah, it's working and we're not landing features there. So do we have to go refactor that now? Okay, fine. Like we can wait. And then 3 years would go by and like it didn't have to get touched. Right. So my point is that I think that a lot of people miss out on the idea that you need to be shipping value to customers, and it means hard decisions. I realize people hearing this, whether it's live right now or in the recording, when people are going to jump in the comments, they're going to say, this guy's an idiot. He's saying just like, write spaghetti code. No one, like, you don't care about like good software engineering practices. I'm not saying any of that. I'll be the first person to tell you that I think you should be writing tests for your code. On my YouTube channel, I talk a lot about testing and my thoughts on testing. I think it's incredibly important. But I also think it's important to get value out to customers. And I would agree that if you incur tons of tech debt or you don't write automated tests for your code, your ability to ship value to customers dramatically slows down. I would say that 100%. But there's a balance to these things. And so I think that from some of my experience, I observed that people were joining to the company later once it was already successful. And not really, they didn't kind of have to live through that of like, hey, we have to ship value to customers. We have to, like, we're trying to survive. It's a startup. Startups, like most startups fail, right? So I think a lot of people just assume like paychecks are coming. Company's doing fine. Like, just doesn't matter. But I think there was a lot of us that were there early on where we were like, we understood that like, that's how we got to where we were, was like, we need to be shipping value. League of Lego Boy 99. You ever wake up and you're like, I'm the man at Subway that would make the best sandwich? I'm not sure, actually. I don't know if I've ever woken up and thought that. I don't know if I've ever woken up and thought about Subway. No, I can't say I've ever done that. But now that you've mentioned it, I suppose tomorrow could be the first day of my entire life, and maybe not the last day, where I do wake up and I say, you know what? I'm the man at Subway, and I could make the best sandwich. But I'm not sure. We'll have to see tomorrow. Maybe next week on the live stream I could see if that's what happened. Thank you. I like that you appreciate the confidence, and I hope it is inspirational. But now that you've mentioned it, I think that I'm going to have dreams about Subway sandwiches. Speaking of Subway, bit of a tangent, but since it was brought up in the chat, what's this deal with this foot-long cookie? What is that? Like, that is something that I think that I require. Like, I shouldn't eat it, but I think I need it. So if anyone wants to do a little bit of research on that and let me know for science, I think that would be appreciated. But yeah, I think I'm going to have dreams about Subway now. Okay, so that was my bit of rant about the coding at work part, but let's kind of dive into some more specific aspects about this. I realize I do a little bit of ranting. If you watch Code Commute, you'll probably hear me rant a lot more. But so I kind of Natalie, it's great if you have kids who will obliterate most of it for you. If I had kids and they obliterated most of that cookie, I think that I would not have kids. I would say, get out. Yeah, I actually have like a problem with like baked goods. My wife and I were just talking about this the other day. So she baked banana bread. And she was like, you like banana bread, right? And I was like, yeah, I love banana bread. And she's like, okay. And I said, well, if you're making it, you're going to have to bring it to work. And she's like, oh, because you're going to eat it all. And I said, yeah, I'm going to eat it all. And she said, oh, don't worry, I'll help you. And I looked at her and I said, that's bold of you to assume that you're going to have a chance to eat any of that banana bread. I have absolutely no self-control if there's like cookies, brownies, anything like that at home. I cannot stop myself at all. It's bad. If it's in the store, like I could walk by like cakes, brownies, cookies, they could be awesome. I won't buy them. Like all my willpower is like at the store. If I have to exchange money for it, I'm like, no. But if someone just like showed up at my house with a chocolate cake, I would eat the entire thing all at once. Cannot control myself if it's in the house. So there's half a loaf of banana bread right now, and there's probably going to be none by the time I go to bed. League of Lego Boy, what's your experience working with CEOs? So limited, I guess. In my experience, I had internships where I basically worked right under the CEO at a small company. It's more like a consulting company. But I've talked about him before. His name's Peter Hansen of Ingenuity Corporation. That was my first internship and second internship. Absolute genius. He was incredible to work for, and like this, I feel like I don't have like a lot of regrets, but like if I could go back into my internships, I would have I think I would have tried to like, I don't know, like this is gonna, it's a weird kind of thing to say, but like extract more value from that, because in hindsight, like he was a, great leader, great mentor, like so smart. And I just feel like in hindsight, I probably could have learned a lot more from him. But I've also shared this before that like when I was going through my internships, my work ethic was very different. Like I have been a very good programmer throughout my career, and in my internships I could demonstrate that, and I was like, hey, it's 9 to 5, I'm done, like I'm out of here, like I don't care, I'm gonna go play video games, I'm gonna go hang out with my friends. I'm in university, I want to go party with my friends on the weekend, I haven't seen them, like my friends from high school and stuff. So I just like didn't care. And I really regret that because it was weird. Once I started working full time, completely changed. I went from like not caring to like I could not leave work and just like overworked for like 8 years straight. And then so that was one CEO. Another internship. I didn't work directly under the CEO, but that was another startup. They were executives from NVIDIA, which I'm sure in hindsight, man, they're probably probably doing great. But yeah, I think the founder and the CEO, they were both like serial entrepreneurs. So they've done amazing in their life. But the CEO there, again, they had an engineering background and yeah, absolute gem to work for. Again, I wish I would have worked more closely with him and like extracted more value from that. Like, I don't like to say that I regret it, but like I probably could have done a better job. And then when I worked at Magnet Forensics, the founder was the CTO, and he was a police officer with a bit of a technical background, enough to go make the first version of the product and have customers, and that was awesome. And the CEO was non-technical, but he was an executive from BlackBerry. And he, like, we're talking specifically about the CEO. He was they had very different leadership styles. I felt like the CTO was, and who was the founder, was very much like more chill, more laid back. He was, I don't know a good way to describe it. Like, I felt like he gave me a lot of autonomy and a lot of trust, and that worked really well for me. And I would say that the CEO I didn't work directly for, but in passing and stuff. Like, I think he was a bit more. And I don't mean this in a bad way, because I think it worked really well for his leadership style. I think he was a bit more of a hard ass and had like high expectations of people, but people understood that like that was his leadership style, and I think it actually worked very well for him. Like, he wasn't. People might say like, oh, he was definitely unrealistic, but I think that like I don't know. I think that he had a way of making that work. So for both of them, I was very much like, very happy to work for. Um, I'm just going to jump over to TikTok because there's a question that came in there. This is from Marcin on TikTok. Sorry that it's not showing in the share chat. Marcin says, any insights into the job market / future of it? Will AI create the expectation that all engineers become more productive / 10x engineers, or will it actually phase out devs? So Marcin, if you haven't already, if you go to my YouTube channel, well, the second YouTube channel, it's called Code Commute. Actually, it's on my main channel, Dev Leader. So go to Dev Leader or go to Code Commute. Some of my recent videos on either of those channels, I literally talk about this exact topic. So if you didn't know I have a YouTube channel, check that out. You can watch it in 2x speed, so you don't have to put up with me just blabbing. But that's where I would say you want the best insight that's most recent. That's what I'd recommend. But my own personal take, just to give you a brief rundown, my take is that in terms of physically replacing human beings, I don't see that happening anytime soon. The reason that I say that is because in practice, like as an engineering manager, I cannot comprehend someone coming to me and saying, by the way, you're getting rid of like this many people on your team and they're just replaced by AI. Like, what does that mean? like who's prompting the AI? Like, someone's still got to do the work. And I think like when people talk about this kind of stuff, they're not thinking about how that works in practice. And I think what's more realistic is that, yes, in terms of enhancing productivity, like I absolutely see that being the case. There's still people that are like, doesn't help me at all. So I think there's a lot of room to go. I think that when we hear people talking about AI, like if you go on the YouTube channel, I specifically talk about Mark Zuckerberg on Rogan and kind of try to critique what he's saying, because everyone was like freaking out, very like a lot of fear mongering. And my interpretation of what he said was literally not like, we're taking your jobs. It was very much, he said, like, I absolutely believe it's going to enhance productivity. And it will, yes, he said later, he's like, it might eliminate jobs, but he's like, I think it will create new jobs as well. And I think that's what we've seen with technology throughout history. And so I'm not fearful of it. And then people will say, sure, like that's in your best interest. You're just an engineering manager. Like, you're just trying to keep your job. And I'm like, sure, but okay. So replace my whole team, replace me, right? At that point, you don't need a people manager to go lead a bunch of AI. Replace me then. You know what I'm doing? I'm going to go build software because I know how to build software, and I'm going to use AI to help me build software. By the time in my opinion, by the time we're all replaced, we don't even need software companies. You just have customers that go prompt AI to have stuff get built for them. I think we're a long way off from that. Will it happen someday? Maybe. I'm just going to keep doing what I do and staying on top of trends, because the reality is, I think in terms of phasing people out completely, the people that will be phased out sooner are the ones that aren't staying on top of anything. And I feel like that's like any technology. So that's my thoughts on it, Marcin. But I think, yeah, if you want to check out the YouTube channel, either Code Commute or Dev Leader. Code Commute has more, they're all vlog style, and Dev Leader is like edited videos, more like tutorials and polished. So either one. And yeah, would love to see you around on either channel. So thanks for the question. Hammer. Oh man, I got to go back up in the chat. Hammer 88. Hello. Welcome. Architects here again. Yes, it is live. You know it's live. Come on. Natalie with molasses equals pro. Yes. I don't know what she put in the banana bread, to be honest. It was good, but I got half a loaf to eat, so I'm going back to it. Why is it that I can identify with the problem of me eating everything? Yeah, I have no self-control of the foods in the house. League of Lego Boy 99. The CEO, sorry, I kind of jumping back to your question. CEO did not know how to program at the last company. At the other two that I mentioned, they did know how to program, and very well. Hammer 88. Sorry, was your question about the CEOs? Are they hands-on or more management role? And to answer that, if it was for the CEOs, sorry that I might have been jumping around too much. The first one was very hands-on. The second one was hands-on, but not in an area that I was working on. So management role from my perspective. And the last one, management role, but in the early days, like the CEO worked on sales and marketing. So he would have been hands-on with that. So in terms of the technical ones, two of them would have been hands-on. Krishna, school programming focuses on learning concepts and writing code for practice. Yes. While job programming emphasizes solving real-world problems efficiently with teamwork, deadlines, and maintainability. Absolutely. Krishna said the entire thing in basically one sentence and summarized everything. So we're done. No, but I think that's the meta point here. So thanks, Krishna. I think that's spot on to my thoughts on this topic. If I jump back to the article, to kind of wrap things up, I don't see any other questions lingering right now. So the list I wrote out, because if you are reading this, I'll put it back in the chat if you haven't seen it. Let me just paste it in. If you're on Substack, I think you know how to find the article. If you are on TikTok or Instagram, it's at weekly.devleader.ca. And for other folks, it's in the chat. LinkedIn, I don't think my messages go to the LinkedIn comments, but weekly.devleader.ca. The article is also posted on my articles on LinkedIn, but on the second part here, so I said, not only is our goal different when we're programming at work, as Krishna pointed out, but I said the constraints look different as well. So I went on a bit of a tangent and a rant talking about the goal being delivering value to customers. That is your goal, number one. So I said there may be different time constraints. So when I talked about time constraints before, it was like your prof saying, here's a deadline, get it done. But I said that in the real world, it's not like an arbitrary deadline. right, that a prof sets. It's like you might be blocking other people's development. You might have delivery cycles that you need to go land features for. You have other stakeholders like sales and marketing that are waiting for these things to be delivered. You might have critical bug fixes that have to go in production right now because you have things that are on fire. So the time constraints are absolutely different. Both situations have time constraints, but they are different. So I think that's important to look at. Architect, I have not watched your estimating projects in software engineering yet. Yeah, that's okay. There's still time, and there'll be more videos. And then we talked about dependencies for school projects, and I said really there isn't. Like it's just not really a thing, right? But in work projects, dependencies are like the name of the game. When you're a more junior developer, odds are you're giving something with more constraints. It's like more well understood. It's very confined. Generalization here. And then the more senior you become, the bigger, more complex projects that you're working on, dependencies are like things that come up all the time. Like not only will you have dependencies, right? You're waiting on other teams or other team members to get stuff landed. You will be a dependency to someone else's work, right? So it's an ongoing thing that you have to try and navigate. So I think getting good at understanding dependencies is really important, and it's a skill, right? This is something, again, when we talk about being in school versus in the real world, so to speak, if you haven't practiced working through dependencies like this and trying to navigate it, yeah, you might find that it's challenging and frustrating and like, why do I have to think about this? Or why is this so much harder? It's because there's just different sets of constraints. When we talked about school projects, one of the things today is not a day for speaking. One of the things I said for school projects was that you're often starting with a fresh slate, right? So go make your graph traversal algorithm program or take these method signatures, go fill them out, but you're not jumping into a code base that's 10 years old, that's deployed to production, that has 1 million users on it. Like you don't do that in school. But guess what? In the real world, when you're working for a company, odds are you're going to be working in a code base that already exists. In many cases, I think for most of our careers, we spend the majority of the time working in what you might argue is a legacy code base. The word legacy, you can assign your own definition to that, but I just mean something that you're not starting from scratch. Ham Radiate says school is spaghetti coding as far as I remember. Yeah, but that might be the case. You might have been writing spaghetti code, but when you're in the workplace, you're jumping into someone else's spaghetti. So that's kind of the meta point here, is that we have to, it's a skill to be able to get into a code base, right? If you're not used to doing this kind of thing because your assignment is basically make a new project in Visual Studio and get coding, or whatever IDE you're using, right? That's going to be different than, hey, go clone down 20 repositories, get this build system, like get your builds running locally on your machine, understand the cloud builds. Like, like there is so much more going on, and that can be extremely overwhelming for people. Vishak, what advice do you have for an incoming intern / new grad? Good news for you that I literally just put out a video on Code Commute. I'm just going to link it in the chat. Let me copy it in. So this literally went out this afternoon. So that video is advice for junior devs who aren't quitting because AI. Alan Johnson, on the job, there's a big gray area between make it perfect and ship it. Navigating the nuance takes practice, 100%. And I think this is kind of the mini rant I was going on earlier, is that I understand as people that like to write code. Like, I'm an engineering manager. I code every day outside of work. I love to write code. I understand that feeling of wanting to make code better. I get it. But we have to keep shipping code. So if you're getting frustrated by this, I have some advice on this in just a moment. if you're feeling frustrated by this, I think you need to have conversations with product owners. Let me take a brief moment to explain what I mean here. If you're feeling like, hey, look, okay, we made that sacrifice, we introduced the tech debt, and now we're not getting the chance to go fix it. Like, what the hell, man? That's not fair. Or this code has grown over time. It wasn't conscious tech debt. It's kind of just something that's been building up over time. And now you're like, oh no, like we need to go rewrite this code. The reality is, if you have a product owner who is the one prioritizing the work to get done, I'm using the term product owner, by the way, to be very generic, because maybe that's your engineering manager, maybe that's a product manager, whatever. The person who's setting priorities, if they're thinking about things from a business perspective, and you're saying, we have to go clean up this code because it's messy, how much business value does that have for them? Like, pardon my language, they don't give a shit. And that's hard for people to hear because you're like, but the code's messy. Like, we need to go clean it up. But it's the wrong message. Like, they don't care how messy the code is. If you find ways to convey the impact of what that means on the business, then you can start having a better, more meaningful conversation. Hey, the code is messy. That doesn't mean much. So that means that those other features that you want us to focus on in the upcoming sprint, they're all in that area of the code. So a couple of things could happen if we don't take time to address the tech debt that's there. One is that it's going to take much longer for us to get those things done. If you want us to deliver on this schedule and do that consistently, we're going to have a problem because the estimates we have are just going to be pushed out. It will take much longer. The other thing is, because that code is messy, we're not able to test effectively. That code is very brittle. That means that not only is it going to take us longer to do because we have to navigate this, it also means we're going to leave that code and not be very confident that it works because we can't write tests on it. And there aren't tests, we're probably going to break more stuff. So you're going to have a longer timeline and you're going to have code that we're not confident in. And you want us to ship that? I think we should propose trying to refactor some of this up front. You see, the difference is, like, you can tell the stakeholder what they care about. So for people getting frustrated by not getting time to do tech debt, change your message. If at the end of the day, you are conveying what the business value is to the people that make decisions about business value and they're not prioritizing it, either you need to communicate better, or they need to communicate better, or maybe it isn't as important as you think. Again, that's hard for a lot of people to hear. So, architect, but my boss says both perfect code and ship it on time while the budget is low. Yeah, well, Devin AI is coming for you then. Watch out. Marcin on TikTok is saying, I find lack of communication is often my biggest peeve working in enterprise software development. Coworkers not messaging, everyone's remote, not updating, not going beyond their assigned ticket in terms of responsibility / accountability. Yeah, like Marcin, thanks for joining. I appreciate the comments and glad you could be here on the stream. Hammer says, I normally spend a few days cleaning up after 2 months of coding, but I start mostly clean coding. It's easier down the line. And this is a really good point from Hammer 88 here. So I know that when sometimes I talk about these scenarios and I try to present it to you in a way that's like, I don't know, I'm trying to be a little bit like sarcastic and facetious and get the point across, right? But I think that what Hammer is saying here is really helpful. So they're saying, spend a few days cleaning up after 2 months of coding, but the next part, if I start mostly clean coding, it's easier down the line. What I would like you to take away from this point is that you will find with more experience and going through more situations like this, that like you're saying, okay, like we went through that project and we took these shortcuts, we incurred this tech debt, we didn't have opportunities for this. Like, how could I write code in a way that enables me to do this more effectively next time? It's never going to be perfect. So don't aim for perfection. How can I do it better next time? One example from my career was that I used to have people saying, like, we don't have time for tests. It's going to double the work. Because we would go, this is literally what used to happen. We would go write a feature, and then we would go send it for like testing, like people would manually test stuff, and then it would be broken, and then we would have to go rewrite it to fix it, and then later we would be like, oh, but like we don't want to keep sending it to testing, like we need regression tests on it. And then people would be like, but if you want me to write the tests on it, I have to go rewrite it again. It's what? And like, I was part of this, by the way. I'm not blaming other people. I was literally in that mess creating it. And it was like, why don't we just write code that can be tested? And like, you pick up on patterns that enable you to write code that is more easily testable. And then you have this cool opportunity where you can say, do I need to test every single line of code to have some confidence? Or can I prioritize which areas of code I should test? Because now I can, because I wrote code in a testable way. I'm not making double the work. But these types of things take practice, and you're going to have your own examples of things that work very well for you than I would, right? Like when I talk about writing stuff in C#, I love slapping interfaces on many things. And a lot of people would say, oh, it's overkill. You don't need interfaces on everything. And I'm like, yeah, but the way I test, that works really well for me. It's no extra work from my perspective. I'm talking about in my own code bases. On teams, I will do what people agree with. But that's how I operate. It lets me write unit tests. I like mocking things in my unit tests. I write integration tests for different purposes. But I have come up with systems and practices that work really well for me. Your systems and practices may look very different. The point is that you identify these things and you can start using them and leveraging them so that you get less frustrated when you have these types of situations in real life. Natalie says, some companies claim that everything is on fire all the time, and at the end of the day, EAD work is consistently requested at 2 p.m. Does the day end at 2 p.m.? Yeah, no, I understand. There's you'll have situations where, depending on where you're working, there's I'm not trying to defend people where there's like completely unreasonable timelines or like micromanagement. From when I talk about this from like a leadership perspective, one of the things that I try to remind people is that I want to make sure that everyone feels they have like a healthy work balance where they're busy, they're challenged, they're learning, they're working on important things, but not to the point where they're overwhelmed. And when I couple that with trying to build trust with them, I want people to trust in me. I need to build trust and respect with them. You can't just ask for these things. You have to be able to demonstrate it. So I need them to know that I'm invested in them. If I can do those things, then what I find is that if I need teams to be able to stretch, then they will. But the problem is that when you expect it all the time, that erodes the trust, that erodes the respect, and then people are much less willing to go do that stuff. And even if they do it, they're going to burn out so fast. So this is something from a leadership perspective, I think that needs to be addressed, and people need to try and create a culture that's like that from my perspective. What was the one thing that made you interested in code? I don't know, to be honest. I started in grade 9. How this worked for me was that I had this situation where in like grade 8, so I was in elementary school, they let me fast track math. So I got to go to high school and do grade 9 and 10 math. And then when I started high school, so I entered grade 9, they were enrolling me in grade 11 math. And they were saying, by the way, like, I think to my parents, like, seems like your son is interested in like science and math and stuff, like, you know, what about these other courses? And they said there's a computer programming class, but it's only for the grade 11 students. But they said, like, he seems to be good at math. Like, maybe he wants to try this. And I was like, yeah, I like computers. I was a computer nerd without programming. I guess that means I played computer games. So I picked that up, and I think the most succinct way to answer this question is like, when I started playing with code, to me it felt like I have an infinite number of Lego bricks in any shape I want. And that framing of like, I can go build anything was like fascinating for me. And I think that's just how it's always been. So I think that's how I would answer that the most succinct way. I've just loved being able to say, like, you can build anything you want with software. Architect just completed a project for a client half a year. I can tell reviewing and cleaning it is tough. Spending personal time doing this. Yep. The cleaning process might break the existing code. Yeah, like that's a thing. And people, this would happen in the real world where people want to clean things up. And it's like, okay, you want to clean it, but there's no tests on it. Are you sure it's a good time to clean this? You understand that by cleaning it, you're potentially incurring other costs, like things being broken. We have to go discover these things, right? It's interesting. It's not trivial. It sounds like it might be trivial on the surface, but like we have to think that like it's literally a business. And your time costs. So it needs to be as much as possible going towards delivering value to customers or ensuring that you're not grinding to a halt because there's so much tech debt incurred. Architect, so cleaning code during development is probably the way to do. Yeah, and I would say like that's why I was saying finding ways to build things along the way in an effective way, I think is the best. There is always going to reach a point where you're like, holy crap, like how did we get here? I don't care how much time people spend on architecting things and whatever clean code thing you want to follow. If you don't believe me and you want to like believe some other content creator, do you know who the Primogen is? He had a video on this and I did a little cover of it. And he talks about like, if software lives long enough, like basically expect it to crash and burn. And you should be amazed, like if it's living beyond this certain point, because basically it keeps getting crappier and crappier. And we don't really have that many options, but to try and keep it afloat until it crashes and burns. So it's a pretty cool video. I'm not really doing it justice, but he talks about it. So believe him. Alan, yeah, hero culture is typically a bad idea. Policy of praising firefighting encourages a culture of arsonists. Yeah, that's a cool, I think that's a cool way to put it. And coding Mountain Man, like the Lego example, it should be fun. Yes. To Alan's point, this is a bit of a tangent, but I wanted to mention it because it's come up in other conversations. I know Alan's talking about hero culture here. And he's saying a policy of praising firefighting encourages a culture of arsonists. Another thing that I wanted to mention that's not on the surface doesn't look bad, because I think the way Alan's pointed it out here is like it's a very obvious kind of analogy, right? Like you don't want to be doing this. It's interesting to think of a hero saving the day, but like, you know, they're just going to be the person that keeps doing this to put out the fires. Another example that I wanted to give you is like when I talk to senior engineers and I talk to how they spend their time, this is especially apparent on teams I've had where I have a very obvious dichotomy of like very junior developers and very senior ones. There comes this point where there's either this feeling of like, man, like I keep putting out the fires and it would be so nice if other people could put out the fires, but no one seems to be able to know how to put out the fires. And do you know why? It's because you keep putting them out. So at some point we have to slow down a little bit. We have to kind of like, yeah, it sucks, but some of the new people, they got to try. And it might be hard. It might be slow, right? You might be able to do it like that, but they got to try. They got to be in the driver's seat. They got to go debug it. They got to go investigate, and they're going to learn. And it's going to be crappy the first time. It's going to feel slow. Not all the time. Sometimes people will get it quick, but expect it's going to be slow. And the next time, it might be slow, but it's probably faster. And the time after that, maybe slow, but it's going to be faster. And if we don't spread this out and have other people trying to put out the fires or do investigations or do other things, the reality is that this load is not shared by others. So again, it's a bit of a tangent from what Alan was saying. I just wanted to give it in another context of not necessarily like encouraging the firefighting, but just this idea that it's hard for people to ramp up if you don't give them an opportunity to do so. When the same people keep taking the same challenges, you're not letting others learn. So just a different example. Architect, I really wish the company I work in embed the cleaning code review process as part of the software development time estimation. Why don't you talk about it? I don't know what it's like where you work, so I don't mean to like, I don't know, like trivialize that, minimize that experience. Oh, I just realized a cat came in. There's two cats in here. You guys didn't say anything about the cats. You see him? That's the fat one. His name's Vinny, and this one is Vito. There you go. Yeah, you guys, come on. There's cats. So, oh yeah. So I was saying, you might want to consider like how you propose this, right? Have a conversation about it. See if there's an appetite for it. You could take on trialing something, perhaps. Like I said, don't mean to minimize it, but I encourage people to try. You know, you're working in an environment and you're part of that environment. If you are passively waiting for things to just get better, I would say assume they're not. So be part of trying to improve it. It's my recommendation. What is the onboarding process for a developer? I know it's different for every kind of developer, but is there a specific process? I can talk about this a little bit. So what's a good way to dive into this? It's gonna be different everywhere. Generally, there is some period of like, get your environment set up. Like you basically have to make sure you have a machine working. That might mean getting some software installed, depending on how much comes on the machine for you. Getting credentials for different things. Like there's that period of like, I'm not really doing work, but I'm getting set up to be able to do work. You have that, and then I think beyond that, what's usually the case that I've seen is like someone will guide you through how some of the tooling works. So, hey, like you want to make a pull request. Okay, like here's how we actually do that. So we'll go make like a small change in the code, like something trivial, right? Like literally add a log line. And I'll explain why a log line is sometimes kind of interesting. So you go do that, you push it up for code review. So now then the other engineer who's guiding you through this can show you the pull request and show you like, here's how the system works. By the way, not every place does this, but I mean, this is a general kind of approach. So you see how this is working. You see what a pull request is going to look like. And they'll explain like, we need people to sign off on this. You'll get comments. People will ask for tests. Then what happens is they'll show you any automation that's running. So, it's going to go run the build. It's going to go run the tests that are there. We didn't add tests because it's only a log line, whatever. And then great, everything passed. I'll approve it. And then they can show you the deployment mechanism. So again, depending on the software type where you're working, I work in Substrate. We deploy to computers across the planet. That's the previous team I used to work on was actually the deployment team. So they would show you like, here's what you should expect for deployment. Here's where these changes are going to go. Here's how you can validate your change, which is why a log line could be interesting, because if you're deploying to the cloud on different infrastructure, they can say, we want to go pull this log line. If you have like aggregated logging somewhere, like here's where we would go. For us, sometimes it's like the logs, depending on the machines, you could go pull logs from a specific machine. So they might show you how to go do that. But the idea is that they walk you through this like end-to-end life cycle of like code change, build with review, and then deploy, and then validate. Then from there, usually what happens is you'll get more simple tasks. So depending on how your team is structured, how they're operating, it's very likely there's a backlog of like things that are, it's not that there's no value in them. It's just they might be more well understood, less complex, like low risk. And the reason for that is that people don't want to set you up for failure. They want you to be able to like build some momentum with things. So, they would, here's a small bug fix, and like probably someone knows where to go look to fix it and they can guide you. Or here's a small feature. It's going to be, it's not that ambiguous. You should be able to figure it out. I can give you the guidance around it. And I would say that's probably a more common way that people get onboarded. But there's going to be all these other things on top of that that are maybe more team specific or organization culture specific. But Dylan, I hope that helps to start. So yes, we have cats. We have 3 dogs and 2 cats. So it's a bit of a zoo. I did, for people that know, on Code Commute, I've been talking, people were asking me to get a 360 camera for on top of the car. And I filmed with it today. So I have 2 videos. And I just realized this. That means I'm not going to be able to put out videos tomorrow. So I'm going to send them to the editor. In the second video, this is a spoiler. And this means you have to go watch the second of the 2 videos. They'll probably be out on Wednesday if you can get them done in time. At the end of the video. And you're going to see more of these, which is cool. So at the end of the video, when I back into the driveway, we have a big bay window in our driveway. And the dogs sit there and they wait. So one is an Alaskan Malamute. Her name's Aria. She's enormous. She's like 130 pounds. And then we have 2 Keeshawns. Those are my 2 dogs. Leah, my wife, has Aria. I guess they're all of ours together. And they sit in the bay window and they're just like, hell yeah, they're home. So they get very excited. And then we have 2 cats, Vito and Vinny. And you got to see Vinny was over here. He's gone now, obviously. And then Vito was the one I picked up. Vinny is the fat one. He is extremely food motivated. If you open up food anywhere in the house, he is right there instantly. And Vito is the one that he's very vocal. So he'll walk around like meowing. And it's not like the same meow. It's always a different meow. It's awesome. So Vito and Vinny are the cats. I'm just kind of zooming through some of the questions here. Sorry. The cats help you on productivity, or they're always bothering. You know what? To be honest, these cats, like, they don't really bother me at all. What will happen is, like, you saw them come in here. That's rare. When I'm getting ready to go to bed and stuff, and I go downstairs and I go to brush my teeth, absolutely Vito will find me. So he'll ignore me the whole day, and then he will come find me right before bed. And if I close the door, if I'm brushing my teeth, for example, like, he's at the door, like, scratching it for me to open it. And then just like wants to sit there when I'm brushing my teeth. And then it's like, if I go to carry him to bed, he's like, no, man, like, like, leave me alone. And I'm like, I thought you wanted to hang out. And he's like, no, I'm just here for the teeth brushing. Like, get lost, pal. So he's kind of weird, but they're both awesome. Are the cats gangster? Yeah. So what would stand out the most to you when looking at an intern or junior dev? This is actually another... Didn't I already send you this? One sec. Let me see. I thought there was another one that I just did on this. Someone asked this. Yeah, I think in the video I linked earlier, I'm just gonna put it in again for folks that didn't see. And I'll touch on this very briefly. But this is the video. It's on Code Commute. It's called Advice for Junior Devs Who Aren't Quitting Because of AI. I think the things that stand out to me are when people are... There's a couple of things, right? So being curious, I think, is very important. I think that it's too easy to be like in this position where it's like, okay, like, I'm just going to code the things I'm told. But the reality is, like, we need people to be curious. Like, it's not just code. Like, you have to learn about the domain that you're working in. You have to understand, like, why we're trying to do these things. Like, what value is it going to be delivering? So it has to start going beyond the code. I think people that are eager to learn, that's helpful. The reality is in our careers, we're always going to be put into situations where there's new challenges. So being eager to learn, I think, is helpful. I struggle with this, right? Like I feel like I'm eager. I would say I'm eager to learn, but if you put me into a new situation, I'm like, oh, I don't like it. I don't like it. But every single time it's very rewarding. So I have to keep reminding myself that. But something else um, I would say is like one of the things that I very much recommend to new developers now is like ask questions. I don't have a better way to say it other than just repeating it over and over and over again. But especially when people are remote, please ask questions. I talk about this in many of my videos. You know, if you need clarity, don't wait. Ask for clarity. Don't stay blocked on stuff. You're not going to bother people. Get your clarity so you can move on. Otherwise, if you're clear about what the goal is, the advice I would offer you is be ready to answer the question, what have you tried so far? If you can confidently tell someone, I have tried doing something, here's what it is, and you're still stuck, no shame, no harm, please ask. You've done some homework. It's going to mean that you're practicing problem solving, you're trying to do things. You will get better at this over time, but try something first, right? And then on top of that, you can add time boxing and stuff, and people want to help you. What they don't want is to be doing your work for you. That's what they don't want. They want you to be productive. They want you to be onboarded to the team, be productive, because then you're going to be helping them, right? So I think a lot of people, especially remote, get very concerned that they're going to bother other people. But I can tell you that from my experience, the new developers, whether they're interns or junior developers, the ones that seem to be the most effective are the ones that don't wait and they don't get blocked. It's okay if you get blocked on something, but are you going to sit there for a week before you say something, or are you going to say, you know, time to do something about this, right? Like getting unblocked is something you need to practice. That's not what I would recommend. Clark, hi Nick, just want to ask, how do you get yourself disciplined when it comes to learning? Do you have any tips when it comes to concentrating, since I was struggling in that part? It's a good question. I don't know a good way to answer this, so it's like a general thing, because I think what might work for me might be different for you versus someone else. What I would recommend, I think, is like, and this is like, it's not just specific for coding, right? And I know actually in your question, you didn't even say anything about coding. So I would say I recommend carving out dedicated time. So if you're constantly like, oh, but I have these other priorities, I have, you know, have to go to the gym, I have to go play ultimate frisbee, I have to go watch Netflix, like I need to go do these things. At some point you need to make a decision about what you're prioritizing. And like, I know it kind of I'm picking maybe what sounds like silly examples, but this kind of thing happens where people are like, no, but I have these other commitments. So I can't. By the way, thank you so much, Dylan. I do appreciate that. Thank you. So people generally make excuses for not being consistent. And I think that that's a bit of a trap. So my first piece of advice is like, if you want to build up that discipline, you need to make sure that this is actually something you care about. And it sounds kind of funny to say, because if you were the one asking me like, hey, I want to do this, I'm like, okay, I hear you. But have you actually convinced yourself that? Because if you're going to come to me and say, but I don't have time, I can't make time, I would just say, well, then you were literally prioritized by definition. It's not an opinion. Like you, by definition, you are prioritizing other things ahead of this. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not. I'm just saying that is what it means by definition. So at some point, this needs to be a priority over other things. I don't know what those things are for you or for other people. So step one is make sure that it's actually a priority. Have an honest conversation with yourself about that. What I need to add into this is that it's not always going to be the same level of commitment. If you're like, I need to get better at learning, I need to practice, okay, maybe you need to go make a trade for something else you're doing and make the time to dedicate towards this. Maybe that's for a couple months. Maybe that's for a year. Maybe that's for a couple weeks. You may have to make a trade. It might not be permanent. That's part one. Part two is like once you have that dedicated time, I think for me, I would say how you're learning is probably a big piece of this. So I think a lot of people go, cool, I carved out the time. I'm going to go watch tutorials and I'm going to learn to code. And by the way, I know you didn't say about code. I'm making an assumption here that we're talking about learning to program. So I think for me, what works really well is like having a project to go build, and it can be literally anything. I've talked about this in many other videos. Pick a project and pick it based on a hobby that you're interested in. I always kind of use the half-joking example of using something related to Pokemon. Go build a Pokedex. Build something that you have an interest in the hobby. Lila just came in. Oh, and she's leaving. So there's that. No more animals. So the idea behind that is that if you're feeling like you're struggling or you're feeling challenged and it's getting hard, like if it's related to a hobby, that can try to keep your interest a little bit more. So those are just a couple of examples. Alan has a really good tip here. Make the problem as small as possible and then dedicate 30 minutes to solve it. Yeah. That's your entry point because you will wind up spending more than the 30 minutes. Yeah. Once you get going. Yeah. And that's so on the make the problem as small as possible part. This is another thing that's a bit of a like software engineering tip in general, right? Like decompose things. The half joking example I gave about make a Pokedex, right? You'd be like, Nick, I have no idea how the hell to make that. Where do I start? Like break it into smaller pieces, right? Go tackle one of those smaller pieces and make progress on that. All right. But you need to dedicate time towards doing it. So, Clark, I hope that helps. Power up play. I see a couple questions here. It might be the same thing, just repeated. What's the best way to become software engineer, self-learning, or college? Hard to answer. If you want my honest opinion, I think you need all of the above. So like I went to university, and for background, I would say that like my choice to go to university was for two reasons. One is that in Canada, if I'm in the US now, in Canada, if you legally want to be called a software engineer, legally, you need to go to an accredited program at university. And that might surprise people, but this is actually the case for many places in the world. People don't realize that to have that title is actually something that's more than just I can work as a software developer. So you need to go to an accredited program at a university. You need to have, I think it's 4 years of work experience. I think it's 4 under a professional engineer, and you have to write an ethics test. So if I wanted to be a professional engineer, I needed to go to university. And I did. I'm still not a professional engineer in Canada. I didn't get my work hours under a professional engineer, and I never wrote my ethics test. There's literally professional engineers of Ontario will chase companies around and tell them you cannot call your employees software engineers. You can say that they're doing software engineering. You can call them software developers, but the title is literally protected. So my argument for university was number one, that. Number two is I wanted an internship program. I had 6 internships when I went to university. I had 5 straight years of school. And in that mix was 6 internships. So I didn't have like summer vacation. I had internships the whole time. So when people are talking about, oh, like, you know, one of the dogs is crying. Lila, come here. I don't know what she's on about. When people talk about how hard it is, and I understand the job market's very tough right now, but I think some people had this expectation that like they would go spend a year learning and then just be able to land any job. Like it just doesn't, it never worked that way. Or it was, if it was, it's not like that was the average thing. The job market's very hard right now, but like I went to school for 5 years and had internships. And I think that was the only thing that made it easier for me, was to say, look, I had the work experience from these internships. It's not an easy thing though. So, when we talk about self-learning or college or university, like I also was programming every day outside of school because I love to do it. So the advice I'm trying to give here is like, other people will be doing a lot and they will be your competition. And if we think about how places are hiring people, I understand people are saying it's impossible to get a job. Like, the job requirements are so ridiculous, right? The intern level, or sorry, the junior level positions need 3 years of experience. Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you're a company, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's ridiculous. That doesn't make any sense, right? But if you're a company and you have 1,000 applicants coming in, how do you filter out the applicants? You keep raising the bar. Sorry, on TikTok, I'm not. Someone was trying to join the stream. Sorry, I'm not having guests come on to speak. I appreciate it though. So I would just say that, like, you probably want to expect that other people are doing all of these other things, and that's your competition. Give me 1 sec. I just want to go get my dog because something's weird. I think she's stuck at the stairs. I think she's just stuck at the top. So my one dog, Lila's getting kind of old. And I think for the first time, I've never seen this before, I think she's afraid of walking down the stairs. So that's a new one. But yeah, power up play, just to kind of wrap that up. If you have the means to be able to go to college, I would encourage it. I realize that that's a loaded statement because college in the US would be very, very expensive. College in other places might be covered. For me in Canada, I had to pay for university, but I had internships that covered most of it. Like, that worked out well. But yeah, I think my point is, like, employers are going to be in a position where they can set the bar high. And it sucks. It feels unfair, but like, sometimes I talk about this stuff and I'm like, I'm just the messenger. I'm sorry. But they can do that. And I realize that feels unfair, but like, that's not in your control. The part that you have control over is what you're putting in on your side. So if other people are like, well, I guess I better go build more side projects. I guess I better go, participate in robotics club. I guess I got to go, commit to open source stuff. I guess I got to go volunteer, like whatever it is. People are doing these things because they have control over that. They don't have control over how many applicants are going for a job, how many job openings there are. You don't have control over it. So it's hard to, I'm just kind of saying how it is. I'm not saying that I think it's good. I'm just telling you, like, that's kind of a reality, unfortunately. So, okay. Since recently when I was making API, I just got curious about the compiler. Then I researched about the compiler. Then I lost my focus. Yeah. So Clark, yeah, hopefully that helps. But yeah, I think, there's nothing wrong with being curious, but I would say maybe another point there is time box your stuff, right? If you have little windows that you're dedicating, set a little milestone for yourself. Maybe that's another way that you can approach that kind of thing. Okay, I think there's no more questions. I mostly got, we're over time. You guys are awesome. But I think I got through most of my article anyway, so this is going to be the advertising part of the live stream. Sorry, I got to do it for folks that, if you're on Substack, we're done here. But you can listen to what I have to say because I appreciate it. And this is probably going to come through pretty crappy on Instagram because it's vertical. Same thing on Substack, but here we go. I got to go over to the full screen mode. So let me start over here, this is the newsletter article. I already linked it to you folks. It's Dev Leader Weekly. A quick note, I changed up my format this time. And you'll notice if you've seen my newsletters before, I like to write, so I'll give you a full article every time. But what I used to do is I would put at the end essentially like a weekly recap of the videos. Someone requested, like, basically they said it's too much noise, so I'm trying it out a different way. And I just wanted to point out, I wanted to pull this up on another tab. I basically am doing my weekly digest now on my other Substack. So if you're like, hey, like, I don't know what videos I missed, or I'm going to try writing more blog articles soon. You can, oh, that's my face. I'm so sorry. A lot of these are Code Commute. This is one from Dev Leader, right? So you can check out this as well. But this is essentially, you know, I write every weekend, I write a newsletter article that looks like this. With that said, for folks, this is free, by the way. So I know it sounds like I'm about to sell you stuff, but this is literally free right now. So Dome Train is where I have my courses. And right now I have my 2 sort of beginner C# courses. They're 11.5 hours in total. They're completely free on Dome Train. So let me put that into the chat. Boom. Hey, Tay Man, good to see you. Harry, what do you use to link chats among so many services? This is restream.io. It's kind of a pain in the butt because it doesn't link everything, but it is what it is. Oh man, sorry, there's more questions that came in. 0x, do you think that it's harder to get into the field now? Yes, I do. I think there's a lot of competition. The thing that I would say, just for the record on this, because someone gave me a bit of shit for this before. I'm not saying that it's not hard, for the record. I absolutely admit it's hard. I think that with a lot of remote work, we have a couple things going on. Let me touch on them super quick. We have some companies that are like, hey, AI is replacing developers. And then we have people in the field that are like, hey, AI is going to replace developers. I guess I better like give up on what I'm doing. I'm not even going to try. So you have these people that are talking about this situation and they're already giving up. Then you have overhiring from sort of the the 2020 era to now, right? There's literally a ton of overhiring. It happened. So you have that going on. Then you have remote work, which means, if you haven't thought about this before, by the way, like, it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. If I were running a company, right? So I'm running a company out of this room and I want to hire people, and I live in the Seattle area. So what used to happen is I would put up a job posting and I would say, looking for people, and you get an office. It's right here up at my couch. And people will be like, oh, I don't live in Seattle, or, oh, fine, I guess I'll commute. But that would only be people that are around the area or willing to relocate. Now you put up a job opening, people from across the planet, across the planet can apply if it's remote. So yeah, the competition for every job went up. Then you have people saying, well, oh, the entry-level requirements are higher. Yeah, they're higher, but you know what's happening? People that don't have those requirements, they're still applying. Like, there's a ton of competition. What I will say though is that, and this is an important distinction, is I'm not saying it's easy now, but I never think that it was easy. Like, I think it's a discredit to say that, like, some of us that went through a lot of school or internships and whatever else, that it was easy for us to go get jobs. It was not. It took me, I was programming from 14, and then, so that was basically whatever, grade 9 through grade 12. So 4 years there, then 5 years in university. I've been programming for 9 years before I got my first full-time job. Right? It wasn't trivial before. It took me 9 years, but I did it. So not like it was easy before, but it's certainly hard now. There's a lot of competition. What is your answer about people who say AI will replace developers? I don't believe that. Power Up Play. I mentioned this to someone else, to Marcin on TikTok, and I would say if you go to, well, I'll just jump over there now, but this Dome Train course package is absolutely free if you want to learn C#. It will teach you from no programming at all to being able to use C#. I'm going to jump over to Code Commute because this is going to answer Power Up Play's question as well. If you go to Code Commute, I'll just put the link in the chat. The most recent videos, I'm going to see if I can scroll them into view. Zuckerberg's AI developer fear factory tech, or where's the other one? Look at this. My most watched video on this channel. Zuckerberg said no more software engineers. So basically I talked about the Mark Zuckerberg interview on Joe Rogan. This is based on, I hadn't even seen it yet, but people were telling me stuff. So I made this video. Then I made a follow-up, and then I made an actual follow-up once I watched it, which apparently had less views by an order of magnitude. But anyway, this one here is Zuckerberg on Rogan. Let me just link this in the chat as well. This is the one, if you want my honest opinion after watching that, I think that this probably explains my perspective the most succinctly. So I would check that out. If you want, like, you know, based on how I talk, if you're like, Nick, that sounds like a long time to have to listen to you, watch it in 2x speed. I'm not going to be offended, but that's what I'd recommend. And yeah, so this is Code Commute. Something that I was just sharing with folks, depending on when you came on the stream, is that people were asking for a 360 camera view. So I got a 360 camera. I'm going to try to put out some videos. The problem is that it costs me money to get my videos edited, and I already lose a bunch of money on my main channel every month, and I don't want to lose more money on Code Commute, so I will figure out a balance. I might, you know, not do every video that's Insta360, because if it's, I'm trying to think on the math, I would lose like thousands of dollars a month in editing costs if I had to do this. And I'll be very honest with you, YouTube money, not so great. So looking for a sponsor if you know one. But Code Commute is kind of a stream of consciousness vlog channel. I talk about software engineering concepts. And kind of like this live stream, but without the actual chat interaction. And then Dev Leader is my main YouTube channel, so I'll put that in the chat as well. I know some folks are coming from there, but this is where I have more edited, polished videos. You can see this is another one I did for AI. I'll just link that in the chat as well if you want to see that. People love the AI videos. Yeah, that's my recommendation on this channel. But yeah, it's mostly tutorials in C# and my stupid face on thumbnails. But I think that's all I got, folks. So I wanted to say thanks so much for being here. And I will see you next Monday at this exact same time. So thanks so much. And until next time, have a good week. Will spamming the watch time earn money? Not maybe, but like it's got to be real. So don't cheat. But thanks, folks.